It's John here. We'll do a quick sound check before I begin. We'll just type in, how's the sound? And then once we get a thumbs up, we're gonna hop into this because this was just announced a couple hours ago. How's the sound? Give a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Cool. Good. I'm gonna wait until we get a couple confirmed people saying, yeah, I hear you. Good, good. Okay, cool. So take a look at this. This was just announced that we're going to see some real big changes on all of this. So if they're going to change this, and all those big changes are set to take place in the next 2 months, month and a half, really less than that, in early January, we're kind of going back and forth on that as if it's going to stick or not stick. But it seems as though they're pushing hard for it to stick. And so the question I ask myself is, how is this going to impact the economy, real estate, the real estate market, the business for landlords, for truckers, for the entire way of life that we've been accustomed to? How is all of this going to change, right? And so when we realize this is the direction that they're going, this is Fox News. You know, there's a lot of different people that are talking about this, though. You know, they're Business Insider. They're considering this ABC News, right? So when we're taking this into consideration, I'm running through the data points of what this is going to like for the overall economy, for the unemployment rate. So take that information in and see what things could really look like in the eyes of the landlord, in the eyes of a crypto investor, in the eyes of someone that's investing in gold, precious metals, and really just take in this info because it's some really crucial info. Someone's saying bad sound, audio. What this is? Hold on one second. I don't know how. How about now? Is it better now? For some, I don't know why that is. Why that happened. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. I just set up this whole new setup, so let's see. How about now? Better? Good? It's weird. Audio is good now. It's so weird. I got this whole new setup here that you guys can see with a microphone, and I installed it myself, obviously, because now we're having the technical issue. But it's worth it hanging in here because this is some really important information. So what is happening right now is that they're going to consider modifying this. So I'm looking at this exclusively from the perspective of how this is going to impact all of us, either from investing in real estate, investing in multifamily property, investing in land, investing in precious metals, silver, gold, platinum, investing all across the board, right? So how are these things going to perform in the event that this goes forward? Because it looks like they don't mean might. You know what that means. They're just slightly putting it out there right now. So they've cautioned that this is going to likely include that, right? And so a lot of people that have already said, okay, I'm going to do it, and then they're going to get the word that they need to do this now. Not 100% of people are going to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead with that. I'm running through the numbers here in a second, and the way that I'm looking at it, it looks like it's going to be like almost 2 times worse than 1929. I'm comparing this to Venezuela. I'm comparing this to other economies. So we can look at these numbers because I know, we've been very spoiled in America for a long time. Everything has been pretty much handed to us in terms of, always had food. You always had options. If you didn't have food, you could always apply for welfare or food stamps. I mean, they had a pretty good system in place for Americans for a very long time. And this is all going to change. So it's recommended, right? But Ned and Michelle, both Democrats, have said that the definition should now include this, right? So it should now include that. And Fauci health officials, they said they don't plan on it yet, right? But it may. That's what they're saying. It may, right? And they're going to take a look at it, right? So, okay, you're going to take a look at it. People should not be put off by the fact that time goes. We may learn more and more about this. So there's going to be more and more, right? And so what I think is going to happen is every time that there's another one, there's going to be less people that are going to say, okay, right? And so the economy is only going to continue progressively getting worse if this is required for someone to contribute to society, right? So I think it's just going to get harder for landlords. A lot of people think, hey, rents are going to continue increasing because if we look back to 2008, rents actually held up well. They've actually increased in many markets because home affordability for most people to qualify for a loan, it got harder. So most people were forced to rent. So there was a supply-demand issue that benefited landlords. But now what we're going to likely have is this just straight up affordability problem. So for now, the definition is right here, right? He said later he hopes that this will not wane, right? But this is basically what they're saying. They're planting the seed right here. And now look at how this works out, how this plays out for everybody. So this is right here on Mayo, right? And so these are the percentages that they're saying. So we go through it, right? 60%, 50, 45, 57, right? Then you got some smaller states up here that are, 70, but there's only 1.3 million people. But for the most part, I think that we can comfortably say, and even be very conservative by this number, and say, let's just go with 60% have said okay, right? 60%. So if that's the case, and we have 161 million people working, I've talked a little bit about this before, but I haven't included all of this new information. So bear with me if you've heard me say this first. I'm just going to skim through it real fast. So, and they're moving forward on this, right? They've already said that 2.5 million truckers said that they'll leave over this mandate if it happens. 2.5 million, right? We have 3.5 million truckers in America. So imagine what that will do to food prices if you have the same demand for food and you lose 2 out of 3 drivers. Food prices are going to get insane if this happens, right? So we look at this, right? And labor unions right now are pushing, but they're pushing to require to cover more, to expand all. So they want all businesses, right? So I'm gonna lay out all the numbers, all the real numbers, and so we can kind of see what this looks like. So if 40% so far have not yet said okay, 60% have, right? So we have this 60% right here. So we have 60%. So just recapping, 60% said okay, 160 million workers, right? So we have 64 million people. That's the difference between 60 and 100. 40% have said no so far, right? So 64 million. Okay. So what's the current unemployment rate? 7.4 million. So let's just say quickly, that half of the unemployment, right? They say no. So that's 2.88 million, right? So we take the 2.88 million plus all the people so far that have said no, right? So it brings out to 66,880,000, right? Now let's just say that half of them, we take this exact number divided by the entire labor market, it gives an unemployment rate of 41.5%, 42%, right? But now let's just say half of the people that have said no say, okay, fine, let's go ahead, let's do that. I want to work, I have to provide for my family, right? So it comes up to a number of 33 million. This is, again, a conservative number because I think that a lot of people half is a big number. We'll just run with that for now, right? So 33 million, right? 33 million divided by 161 million, the entire workforce, it gives an unemployment rate of 20%, roughly 21%. But here's where things start to get really, really crazy. So 1933, the recession was mainly the stock market, right? banking panicked, monetary contraction, gold standard, right? Decreased international lending, tariffs. So there's a couple problems, but now at that time it was 25.6%. 25.6% was the unemployment rate. Now, right now, if you have 60% so far that have said okay, let's go ahead and do that. Remember from this chart here, 60% said okay. So if we go 60% have said okay, now what happens when, let's say, 35%, so let's just say 3.5% out of 10, 3.5 out of 10 people say, no, I'm not gonna do the next one. I'm not gonna do it, right? So if we take that number, and that's, I think, conservative number. You know, you're saying 65% of people will say, okay, go ahead, let's do the next one. If 35% of people say no, right? We take that number right here. So 35% of the entire 96 million that said okay, it comes out to a pretty big number. That number is 33 million people. 33 million, right? Would no longer be applicable to contribute to society. So 33 million, right? You take that number plus the people that already said no, it gives a whopping number of 67,250,000 people, right? And then you take that number divided by the entire labor force right now, and it will give an unemployment rate of 41%, a whopping 41%. So when we take that number and then we look at what 2009 was like, you know, only 9.9%. So it'll be 4 times worse than 2009. 4 times worse than 2009. Then what we're also looking at, this is outside of the overall unemployment rate, is the inflation problem. Everything is getting so much more expensive. So beef is up 24%, hotels and motels 26%, gasoline 51%, 15% on laundry equipment, natural gas is up 28%, used cars and trucks 26%, bacon, which I love bacon, up 20%, furniture and bedding 11%, cars, rental cars 39%, eggs, and so everything is going up, right? So when you have an unemployment problem if you had a whopping, you know, these are the numbers, 41% unemployment, that's roughly half the country, almost half the country. And so the people that are able to survive, these people are going to have the ability to be able to compete in a marketplace when you have rampant unemployment rate, right? And then you see all of the thefts that are happening throughout San Francisco, New York, LA. People are just running into stores with people and they're just taking as much as they can. What do you think will happen to these small retailers in an economy where people are just hungry? They're hungry. They're going to go and do whatever they have to do. And so we're looking at this and you're like, okay, then when we're looking at unemployment rate in Venezuela is only 6.9%. But the poverty rate is roughly 76%. So a lot of people live in true poverty over there. I mean, like, they're eating out of trash cans. So it's 76% of the overall population lives in poverty, right? Well, if they require the next one, that's 41%. This is only considering the workforce. So of 161 million people that are working. In America, we have 325 million people, now maybe 330 million people. So what you're going to have is you're going to have a household of a husband, a wife, and a couple kids. And so not only are the people that are unemployed in trouble, but also their family. So we could easily see a situation of us surpassing Venezuela. We also have much higher debt, and we're in a time right now of you know, people just think that this economy is just going to continue going on forever and ever and ever. And to me, it doesn't seem as though it's possible, because if we're stepping into this situation, this is honestly like a bear trap. And the data suggests we may need to do it more often. Then we'll do it, but we want to make sure we get them. So, and you have to also remember too, it's like, as this continues going, every single time they say the next one is needed, there's going to be less people that are going to want to work, right? And then as this all happens too, it's quite fascinating that Biden is increasing taxes. So Biden's increasing taxes to, surprise winners. It's going to be Wall Street and tobacco companies. So the elite again are going to get very, very big benefits, and there's going to be increased taxes for small business. And so what we're likely going to see here is a situation where small businesses, they're not going to be able to afford to hire people, especially not at $20 or $22 an hour. There's going to be a lot of what I think is going to be like a black market type of situation where people are bartering again. That's what it's crazy to me to actually think that is going to likely come to America, but we could see a situation where people are bartering shoes and little gold coins and silver coins. People are bartering bread and items, as if you're, in the back of a mall and someone's trying to sell you a stereo, that type of thing. And it could be happening very, very soon. If you have half of the country that's going to be put out of work, that's a huge problem. People aren't going to want to be in the cities. I know for sure. I myself would 100% not want to be in the cities. For example, the Venezuela reference, we have a nanny that comes here. It comes 5 days a week, right? And comes from 8 a.m. to noon. This lady was a dentist, a professional dentist in Venezuela. And she fled Venezuela. And here she makes, she comes here, makes breakfast, does all the laundry, cleans up the place, does everything. It gets $450 a week. So, about $2,000 a month. And she was a professional dentist in Venezuela. And she fled, right? She fled. She wanted safety and opportunity. She came to America. And she doesn't really speak English. But what's going to be interesting here is going to essentially be how this communicates with Venezuela. Because I think we're in line with the hyperinflation. I think we're going to be stepping into a situation with universal basic income and the middle class, not the upper middle class, or even the upper middle class guy, but I'm talking about the people that are, not making insane money are going to be in trouble. And when I say insane money, I'm talking like, more than doctors. Like people much, much, much well off may be okay. People that are making a couple $1 million a year, maybe, but the people that are in the middle class, they're going to basically get printed out of commission because the big brother is going to print so much money going forward. If you look at all these infrastructure bills, all these stimulus packages, they're talking about universal basic income. Newsweek was covering this the other day, talking about they wanted to give $2,000 a month. What I think could really be a great investment. I think gold is going to be a good investment. I think land with a natural water source is going to be a great investment. I think vehicles will be a good investment. Basically, getting out of bad debt with high adjustable rate mortgages and getting out of cities could be a smart thing. But it's nuts to me to see where this is all going. I just think that cities could become really scary. You look at what's happening right now, as I mentioned, LA and San Francisco and New York. You look at what's happening in these big cities now, and this is with all of everything basically still intact. But you wait another 45 days, these deadlines start looming and things start changing. We could really see a situation with unemployment rates and crime levels, past your wildest imaginations. I'm going to check up on some of these comments. Never-ending inflation. If UBI happens, yeah. Downtown Honolulu. Yeah, it's own chickens as well. Parts. It's it's pretty fascinating just when you really look at these numbers, the data points. These changes, the people that said okay the first time are going to think that they got duped. They're not going to want to. A lot of them, I think, are going to be pretty PO'd. They're going to be pretty PO'd. And when you just look at the numbers again, let's just say 60%. You quickly run through it out of 161 million workers, and everything is looming. Distribution is going to be a question. They're saying 2.5 million truckers again. Just running through this again for the people that just came in. And their labor unions are pushing to expand to cover more and more businesses, essentially all businesses. 40% have not yet said okay. So that's 64 million people out. and then you look at the current unemployment rate, let's say half of those people have not yet said okay. Take that number plus the people that already said no, gives you 66.8 million. If everyone stayed to their guns and said no, it would give that unemployment rate of 41%. But if half said okay, right? Half said okay, I'm going to, whatever, sure, let's go. Take that number plus, or you take that number divided by the 161, it gives you 21% unemployment rate, right? Which is very comparable to what 1933 was. And that's without these big changes. Now, if 60%, this 60% that have already said okay out of the entire labor force of 161 million, you take that number, if 35% of the people that originally said okay say no, which is conservative, that's 33 million. And you take that number plus the people that already said no, you add those two up, it's 67 million people. And you divide that from the total workforce right now, it's a 42% unemployment rate. That means 42 people out of every 100 are no longer working. In 2009, 9.9% unemployment rate. And then you look at the inflation cost, everything's going through the roof. So even the people that are working are going to be struggling more than ever. And then you just compare it to Venezuela. The people that aren't working, you add in the fact that the people that are struggling have children. We're going to be hitting these numbers. No doubt. America is going to be hitting these numbers at the current trajectory that we are on. So if this does happen, as I mentioned, I think cities are going to be a problem. I think you're going to be able to buy real estate in cities pretty cheap, especially because places like LA, a lot of the big cities have policies that do not favor the landlord, really. You know, LA and New York and San Francisco. These are very challenging cities for landlords to navigate. And so I think these landlords are going to have a problem, you know, maybe weathering the storm, especially more than, say, owning real estate in Tennessee or Texas or somewhere like that. So we could see a situation where we see a very big bleed out of the small mom and pop landlords all throughout those locations. You know, as I played several times, not going to play it again, of Newsom laughing about buying 6,000 units from small mom and pop landlords over the last 5.5 months. What do you think this is going to do to all of those states that are sitting on so much rent relief capital? LA only distributed 2%. Florida has only distributed 2%, or not, excuse me, not LA. All of California only distributed 2% of rent relief money. Florida only distributed 2% of rent relief money, and New York distributed 8%. What are all these states going to do when it comes time and all these people are out of work? What I think they're going to do is they're going to run out there and acquire property. That's what I think they're going to do. They're going to run out there, acquire a bunch of property, and then we're going to have a situation where it's just harder and harder and harder for landlords. You know, I personally love real estate. I love real estate. I think it's an incredible, incredible investment. I've always talked very highly of real estate. I think it's, you know, it's always interested me ever since a little kid. But now the game is changing, and I'm a very, very big fan of understanding the rules to the game before I begin playing the game. And right now, all the rules are changing, and most of the market thinks that all the rules are still from 2018, 2019. And I think a lot of these people are going to get a very harsh wake-up call just probably the next 3 to 6 months. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the holidays. But they were very strategic and smart with setting that deadline for January, because people come out of the holidays and people come out in more debt than they came into. So people are going to be pushed into a corner to make a decision, and that decision generally is going to be to go ahead and do it. So crime, where you decide to live, how you decide to invest, all things you need to take into consideration going forward. To me, it's pretty wild, though. They already know I'm going to say, learn Spanish. Yeah, the lady that actually comes over and helps my wife speak Spanish to my wife and my son, so they're learning. I need to learn Spanish. They already know I'm going to say, spot on. Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm right or wrong? Drop it in the comments. Again, like, I'm always the guy that will say, this is the info I'm looking at. This is the data I'm looking at. I'm not here to, scare anybody. If you have information that's better, you have information that's more accurate, maybe there's something I'm missing, drop it in the comment section. If it's better, if it's accurate and it's more viable, and more likely to happen, I'll gladly delete this live stream and I'll give you full credit for the real answer. But this is what I'm seeing. These are the data points that I'm seeing. This is the data that they're putting out there. And all I'm simply doing is plugging in the numbers and looking at how this is going to impact all of us, reflecting back to some of the biggest depressions and recessions that we've seen over the last 100 years. And it looks as though we're about to 2x the 1929 crash. 2x. And then you also look at, Saul Armorova, how they want to end traditional banks. These are all, again, like, you look her up because they did a whole interview with Saul Armorova, and they were talking about her plans for banks and for a Fed account. It was all pretty unbelievable, pretty mind-blowing. And I think people are just sweeping it under the rug. People need to pay attention to this because everything happening right now is going to completely change everything that you've ever known through America. Everything's changing. Everything is changing so fast, and it's just so wild to me. It's hard on unemployment to pay $25 an hour and then try supporting a family on that. Yeah, so the thing is, it's not about this is the problem here. So it's not about, like, you can't support a family on $25 an hour. That's the reality. You probably need 50 or 60 an hour, right? That's how much people probably need to be able to afford a roof over their head and take care of a family. But if the employer is not getting more than $55 or $60 an hour from the employee, then the employer goes out of business. Point blank. The employer goes out of business. So if you have 10 employees that require $50 an hour, if they only bring in $52 an hour, $2 an hour across 10 employees is not going to cover the lease. It's not going to cover the utilities. It's not going to cover the insurance. It's not going to cover the cost of goods and services that you're selling. And that doesn't even factor in that the boss doesn't make any money. The boss is taking a lot of risk. He's signing the dotted line. He signed on a 5-year lease. He's putting everything on the line. I mean, the boss should be making money also. So if the system is set up in a way to where the employees can't make enough money to survive and the boss can't make enough money to survive, then everything goes online. The big corporations take over, and there are no winners in the middle class of America. So it has to be a win-win scenario for everybody. But yeah, do you guys agree with me? Disagree with me? Drop it in the comments. Let's talk about it. That's why I'm like, people are like, oh, you're putting out stuff like, you're selling fear. It's like, no, I just think that we're stepping into the biggest bubble. I think this is a big bubble. And I think a lot of people that are on YouTube and social media that are talking as if everything is amazing, they probably won't be there talking about these things in 6 months or a year's time, because a lot of people are about to get wiped out. But the people that are actually giving advice, based on the real data, the real information, the real numbers, I think people are going to look back and realize, wow, that content aged really, really well. And this information that I'm giving out is based on the true information. There's no emotion. I'm not plugging in what I hope happens. Someone once told me a smart person sees things for what they really are, and everyone else sees things for what they want them to be. I don't want this. Trust me. I have 2 young kids. I have a 22-month-old, and I have another baby that's a month old. You think I want this stuff to come true? No. I want them to have a life of prosperity, opportunity. But at this rate, it doesn't look like that's going to happen for them or for really anybody in this country. So I love real estate. I love investing, but we need to make investments based on the true reality of the economy and not based on what was once true. So what was once true is that you could come here from India. You can come here from Mexico. No, not even know the language, right? But you're dedicated. You wanted to study. You worked hard, and you put in your time. You hung out with the right people. You're really practicing. You're studying. You're saving your money, and you got an apprentice. You got a mentor. You worked your way up. Maybe went to college, but you worked hard. And then at the end of your life, maybe you had a wife and a couple kids. You had a property or 2 or 3. You went on a vacation every year. You had all these opportunities, but now that's not going to be a reality. Like, this new America is not going to be a reality that people are going to be able to simply just do that, right? And so that's all I'm saying. I'm saying the opportunity is still probably going to be here, but I think it's going to be a completely different perspective, like a completely different type of opportunity. And we're probably going to go through a lot of pain before we start to see opportunity start opening back up in America. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, someone says education system is turning out. Yeah, I mean, so I went to 5 different high schools. A lot of people don't know this, but I went to 5 different high schools when I grew up. You know, I bounced around a lot. I didn't stay in one school. I went to 5 different schools, and that was, at the time I thought, oh man, I'm getting a disservice because all my friends are going to the same school, and every time I'm moving to a different school, I'm getting into a different lesson, and I wasn't really learning much. But then reflecting back on it, I'm like, that was probably a good thing, because these schools today are like indoctrination facilities. Like, people can't think for themselves. It seems it's hard almost for people to take in information that is outside of, what's considered normal. And a lot of my friends that are from backgrounds where, they struggled more, you can have conversations with them on a wide array of different subjects. But some of my friends that are also very, very educated, went to 4-year schools, those same people, you can only have specific conversations with them, and anything outside of that, they shut you off. So it's interesting, kind of like looking at how this whole the power dynamic is created through the education system. So I personally don't have any intentions of sending my kids to traditional schools at all. Like, I would rather them not go to school than to go to a traditional school. And I would rather them, get mentors and do things the right way rather than going through these schools. Like, I had one teacher, I was in I think I was in 10th grade maybe. And she's like, okay, what do you want to be when you get older? And I was like, I want to be a doctor. And she's like, oh, pick something realistic. I'm just sitting there thinking, like, you make like $35,000 a year. Who are you to tell me? You barely even know me. Who are you to tell me what my potential is? But that's what these schools are. They just they beat you down. They force you into a corner to believe a certain thing. And if you don't believe that thing, then you're a bad person. And everyone it's, I don't know. It's not for me. It's not for my kids. I'm definitely not sending them to any public schools. That's for sure. But yeah, it looks to me like we are going to see a really big real estate crash, really big economic crash. So invest very wisely. And yeah, get ready. Opportunities are definitely coming. And next couple months, I think it's going to be very clear about how bad this pain really is. I'll catch you guys on the next live stream. If you guys want to chime something in here in the comment section, we'll talk about it real quick before I head out. Land of the debt slave. Yeah, I mean, I think there's good debt. Someone said there's good debt, and then there's bad debt. So before, what was considered bad debt would be credit cards, car loans, right? And good debt was considered real estate, really, really good asset that was paid off by the tenants, and that was considered good debt, right? But now, just the big question to me is, will the definition of good debt and bad debt change if incomes fall greatly in America and opportunity falls greatly in America? Because that would mean that rents would have to follow. Rents won't sustain themselves if we have a situation worse than 1929. They just won't. They won't sustain themselves. Rents will fall, and if rents fall, landlords can't cover their debts, then landlords will go out of business. So I think that the definition of good debt, bad debt may likely change. But then again, if you own real estate, just make sure that you can hold it through a storm. Make sure that you're not leveraged. Like, if you have to drop your rents 20, 30, 40%, are you still in business, or are you going to be out of business? Also, I'd also suggest checking with your insurance companies throughout all your properties. Check with your insurance companies and see how coverage is looking, forecasting out 1 to 2 to 3 years, because some places are getting harder and harder and harder to get coverage. Like, I just bought a place in Florida, closing on, I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday. And it was challenging getting insurance. Like, it was really, really hard, but, still bought it, but the rates were pretty high. And so that, I think we're seeing that. I have also somebody in New Jersey that's getting he's getting bent over the coals trying to insure properties all throughout New Jersey right now. So we're going to start to see insurance problems too. So if we look at it, Steven Schwarzman, Larry Fink at BlackRock and Blackstone say utility costs are going up. and then we have insurance premiums going up, and then we have a situation with very high unemployment rates, which could bring rents down. So how can you have rents fall and then carrying costs increase, and then we also have all these new changes for energy on properties, which they just passed in the Build Back Better Act, or I think it was Build Back Better. Yeah, so there's going to be higher cost also for property ownership. So we're going to have these big changes. So my suggestion is really just to have the liquidity ready, have the capital ready, but you do pay a tax every month holding that capital because of inflation. Everything's going up, up, up. You might lose 2% a month holding that capital. So you do take that chance holding it, but when things hit the fan, you want to be able to make a buying decision. So make sure if you're going to move that capital into something else, that it's going to be liquid enough to be able to sell. The other thing that I wonder is we've never really seen Bitcoin and crypto throughout a recession, like a 2009, 2010. I wonder if people see that as an opportunity to buy more, or we see a lot of weak hands fall. It's a big question that I have. Will people get rid of Bitcoin before they get rid of their car or before they get rid of their house? I ask myself these questions. I say, what assets are people going to hold throughout these big, the dark times? What assets will they definitely not get rid of if they have an option? I would think that it would be housing. I would think that it would be a car, and I think it would be food. I think they'd maybe get rid of health insurance. I think maybe they'd get rid of maybe some crypto or some stocks. But I think that if things hit the fan, I think that gold probably holds up well. If you look at the gold chart over the course of the last 50, 60 years, throughout recessions and depressions, gold held up well. And when the dollar left the gold standard in the early 1970s, gold like 10x. Throughout the 2000 internet bubble, it did well. Throughout 2008, 2009 crash, it did very well. So people, I think, are a different mentality. I've talked about this before, but I think it's a different type of buyer that's buying gold than someone that's buying, some cryptos. But we'll see how crypto, how gold, how all these assets perform going forward. But make sure that you're nimble. Make sure that you can pivot and bend with the times, because I think we're getting ready to see some really, really big changes coming to this economy. I'll catch you guys on the next live stream. If you guys enjoyed it, please hit that like button. YouTube will share the content. And hit the notification bell if you want to be notified of my next live stream. Consider subbing, and catch you guys later.